Hello, welcome to InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw.
And I'm Ross Sutherland.
We're talking today about volunteers. It's part of an organization's nonprofit base, a really important part of how they can thrive and grow and succeed. And with us today is someone who really knows a lot about volunteering and volunteers, Tammy Baumann. Welcome, Tammy. Nice to have you with us on InSight today.
Thank you.
In addition to being here as the Vice President this year of the Mid-Valley Volunteer Managers Association, Tammy is a Visitor Experience Coordinator for the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. She has been a volunteer program coordinator for the state parks for 10 years. State Parks engages approximately 6,000 volunteers annually, contributing an average of, are you ready for this, 600,000 hours of service per year. Oh, that's sensational. I'm so glad you know what you're talking about when it comes to volunteers. That's exactly why we asked you here.
Thank you.
So, nonprofits are a business, right?
Absolutely.
And so they have boards and business plans, and you have made a case with me before the show that a well-run nonprofit has to have a volunteer management program separate from human resources and yet with an organized training program. Why?
So wherever you place a volunteer program within your organization, whether it's in human resources or in marketing, the key to this is actually having an official program that's established, that has a place on your organization's strategic plan as a mission delivery method. Oftentimes we find that volunteer programs are simply job descriptions or duties of somebody's multifaceted job description, and they don't actually have an organizational place or a place in the organizational structure. So when budget is needed or other resources are needed or some type of an evaluation of the risk needs to happen, it doesn't happen because it's not part of that organizational structure. It's just something that they do in a way that they pull off special events or a way that they get somebody to do something for them rather than part of their organizational structure, which is really important.
That sounds a little on the loose side, kind of like, oops, we need volunteers, who do you know, right?
Exactly. I call it casting the net. If we're going to throw the net out to the ocean in hopes of grabbing the right fish, we need to be prepared to get some old tires and old shoes along with it. Whereas if we fish with the right kind of bait, if you will, or use the right kind of strategy for properly engaging and running a program that provides volunteers with a great experience, then we're going to get the right volunteers doing the right work, delivering our services for us, and becoming our mission ambassadors.
That's wonderful. So what is the secret of getting and growing a volunteer base? How do you get the right people?
Getting and growing a volunteer base. The very first
25
thing,
words or less.
There you go. The very first thing I would say is really know what it is that you're going to be asking volunteers to do. Be prepared to know what the job is that needs to be done, what type of authority it needs, what types of resources, whether it is in a position that is appropriate for a family or a female or an older gentleman. Who is it that's going to be able to do this work for the organization and be successful at it, and then a recruit for that volunteer instead of just taking, we call it the mirror test. You know, if they pass the mirror test and are breathing, they're going to be the right volunteer. And that's just not a good fit for anybody. So really know your organization, know the type of work that is appropriate for volunteers to do, and then invite them to consider you as a place to serve in doing that work.
Well, and also with volunteers is moving them in the sense that I know from our longtime volunteers that that what they want to do changes over the time. So it may be somebody, and also their abilities. It may be somebody who's on their feet a lot and wants to work with a lot of people. Later decides, you know, I can't stand all that standing as much. So moving them within the organization is also important.
And it's not only just checking in with them as they serve in your organization, because not only is their physical ability change, but some volunteers come into the organization because of a social aspect. They know somebody, or because it's a way to kind of interact with others individually, while other volunteers come in because they believe in your mission. And however they've entered your organization, they're going to either build a social need and move from mission driven to that social need, or they're going to come in from a social need and then they're going to become invested in your mission.
That's interesting.
And as your volunteers meander through this, you want to be able to put them into service opportunities that maximizes that interest.
And one of the things I wanted to focus on before we get into training is something that you mentioned about intake. And somebody can come into an organization and say, oh, I don't care where you put me, just wherever I can do some good. But you can be more pinpoint about that when you're vetting somebody when they come to you.
Absolutely. So the intake process is really important because volunteer motivation is always an interesting conversation among volunteer professionals. Oftentimes, volunteerism is seen as just a completely altruistic thing, and that's just not true. Although many people give of their time and talent for the right reasons, there's usually an underlying need that needs to be met for them. And if we identify that in the very beginning and figure out why they're coming to serve with your organization, it's going to help you place them into a position that is going to meet that need. And then through continuously supporting your volunteer, you're going to find out what the next motivation is, and you're going to be able to meet that need. So if I'm coming into your organization because I truly believe in your mission, but you've put me in a position where I see no mission impact whatsoever, it's going to be a little bit hard for me to continue to volunteer for you if I don't feel as though I'm really making a difference. Whereas somebody else may come into the organization and they trust you, they know that you've got a great mission, and they just really don't want to be one of those frontliners. They're there because they need the solitude. Don't put them on your front desk. That's not the best place for them because that's not what they're looking for.
So how do you train volunteers? Give me an idea of what a good, let's go for the top, okay? Great volunteer training management program looks like. What goes into it?
I'm going to say that a volunteer training management program, no, I just said that backwards. A volunteer management training program looks just like any other training that you establish for your organization. It entails a subject matter expert in consultation with somebody that can do a really good job delivering training. And one of the key things for nonprofits is they oftentimes mistake orientation and training, and they confuse the two. And with volunteers, orientation is very important because that's where you help them navigate your organization. That's where you build ambassadors and you help them learn who you are and how they are a part of that. And then training prepares them to do the job that you've asked them to do.
And how do you integrate that with employees? I mean, with staff? Because as I'm getting it, you're saying that volunteers are in a way like staff. You want to give them that feeling that maybe someday they could become staff?
I think you're asking two questions. So if your organization can develop volunteers into professional staff, fantastic. That's I know a lot of organizations that recruit and hire from their volunteer team, but there's no guarantee for it. But experience is experience, and that's phenomenal and very valuable. But your original question was how do you make that work with staff? And volunteers are an unpaid human resource in any organization, and that's how they should be. That's how the program should be developed. You train them right alongside of staff. You use staff to train volunteers and use volunteers to train other volunteers and to integrate in with staff. You're going to be hiring very talented people in your volunteer team. You're going to hire people that are able to do the job that you need to have done in a very professional way. So maximizing those professional attributes to build up your training program is going to be a good key to success for any organization.
Well, and once you have a volunteer management program, how do you maintain it? How do you make it thrive so that it continues?
So the first thing you're going to do is really do those first steps. You're going to pay attention to what jobs you have for volunteers, and you are going to bring volunteers on board to do those jobs in a really effective and efficient way, matching the volunteer with the position and then supporting them as they go through. You're going to provide them with great orientation, and you're going to train them to do the jobs that you've asked them to do, and you're going to continue to support them and supervise them, providing all the resources that they need, matching delegation and levels of service in your organization as those volunteers grow with you. We have one particular volunteer in our organization that's single-handedly put in over 10,000 hours.
Oh my gosh.
So the way that he interacts with our organization when he first started is very different than the way that he interacts with our organization now because of the trust that's been developed through his years of service. And then comes everybody's favorite topic, and that's recognition, right? So volunteers and recognition, everybody tends to say, oh, we got to put money into recognition, we got to put money into recognition. So one of our MVVMA membership nonprofits, Shangri-La, actually puts in on their volunteer application, how do you as a volunteer like to be recognized?
Ooh, that's great.
It's a brilliant question.
That's a neat yeah.
And what it does is it tells you that the volunteers love to be recognized, right? Because they don't necessarily get a paycheck, but recognition is a very individualized thing. So if you have 5 to 10 volunteers, you can do that. The more you scale your volunteer program, it's a little trickier, right, to do everybody individually. But you're going to recognize them. And then retention is the magic ingredient for retention is everything that we just talked about before. If you provide your volunteers with a professional environment in which to serve, and you provide them a good experience in their service, they're going to come back. That's your retention right there.
And they're your best ambassadors for bringing new people in and connecting with the rest of the community in a way that really represents your organization.
Absolutely. And something important to remember about volunteers is they're more than just a way to get work done. They are also voters. They're donors. They're sponsors. They are Goodwill Ambassadors. And by building a volunteer base that is committed to your organization because they've received a great experience and they can see that you truly are dedicated in delivering on your mission, you've then created relationships in all of those aspects of your organization as well.
Ross, you were asking about the organization that she's the vice president of.
Yes, could you tell us more about the Mid-Valley Volunteer Managers Association?
Absolutely. So the Mid-Valley Volunteer Managers Association is a local association for those that are in the profession of managing volunteer programs or engaging volunteers. And we have both paid and unpaid volunteer managers as part of that. And managers, coordinators, administrators, whatever the title may be, if you're involved in engaging volunteers, we're the place for you.
Well, and it's great too because if you're starting a new program, you don't have to invent all of this stuff on your own. They're already.
You can talk to people
you can
who've
talk
been
to
there,
people,
done that.
and there's applications and examples of different kinds of paperwork and stuff. It's a wonderful organization.
How do they get in touch with you?
So MVVMA.org, really easy. Everything is on there, including membership-only areas of toolboxes, and we have a listserv that allows our members to all communicate within each other, and that's exactly what we do. We get, hey, I'm looking for this type, I've got this type of a volunteer need, or even more importantly, I have this volunteer that's looking to serve but is not a good fit for my organization. Who can use, who can engage this volunteer in a certain way? And I think Phil mentioned earlier on your show that one of the things that he finds really helpful about getting nonprofits together is that networking ability, and that's what MVVMA offers. Is we sit in a room and we just battle the tough issues out loud, and we brainstorm them. We create resources and toolboxes, and very seldom does anybody have to start from scratch on something on their own.
We have Kelly Schaefer, who is our volunteer coordinator here at Capital Community Television, and she's also a member.
And she's actually one of our officers. She does membership.
That's right. Well, we care about volunteers. You care about volunteers. I think I really learned something today that I didn't know. So this is wonderful having you.
Excellent. One more closing thought. If anybody's interested in how do they bring their volunteer program up in terms of their staff, the Council for Certification on Volunteer Administration, it's CVA, is a professional accreditation program that offers an international accreditation for volunteer managers that really demonstrates best practices for practitioners in the field. So it's a great avenue to professional development for any organization to invest in.
Wealth of information today. Thank you so much for joining us today on InSight, and thank you for joining us. Hope you learned something right along with us today. Thank you.